When 17-year-old Madison Brooks shuffled onto that stage in her dirt-stained overalls and scuffed work boots, the judges rolled their eyes and one actually whispered, "Next," before she even opened her mouth. But the moment her voice filled that room, time stopped, jaws dropped, and three seasoned professionals found themselves fighting back tears they never saw coming. This is the story of how a girl who spent her mornings shoveling hay and her nights dreaming in silence became the voice that would make an entire nation believe in miracles again. Madison had grown up on a struggling cattle ranch outside Bakersfield, California, where the sun beat down mercilessly and hope seemed as scarce as rain during drought season. Her father, Tommy Brooks, was a third-generation rancher whose weathered hands told the story of endless 16-hour days and sleepless nights worried about mortgage payments. Her mother, Linda, worked double shifts at the local diner just to keep the lights on and food on their table. While other girls her age were posting selfies and planning prom dates, Madison was hauling 50-pound feed sacks and learning to fix broken water pumps. Her world was defined by calloused palms, sun-bleached hair, and the constant ache of physical exhaustion that settled into her bones like dust after a windstorm. At Jefferson High School, she was practically invisible. The popular kids called her Farm Girl when they acknowledged her existence at all. Brittany Sullivan, the head cheerleader with her perfect blonde highlights and designer clothes, would wrinkle her nose whenever Madison walked by, making comments about how she smelled like animals. The football players would moo when she passed in the hallways, thinking they were hilarious. Madison learned to keep her head down, to slip through school like a shadow, counting the minutes until she could escape back to the ranch, where at least the animals didn't judge her for wearing the same 3 pairs of jeans or carrying her lunch in a paper bag, instead of the trendy lunch boxes everyone else had. But here's what nobody knew about Madison Brooks. Here's the secret she carried in her heart like a precious, fragile thing she was afraid to share with the world. Every evening, after the last cow was fed and the barn doors were latched shut, Madison would climb up to the old hayloft and sing. She would sing with a voice so pure, so powerful, so absolutely breathtaking that it seemed to come from somewhere beyond this earth. She sang country ballads that made the barn cats stop and listen. She sang gospel hymns that her grandmother had taught her, filling the dusty air with notes that seemed to carry prayers straight to heaven. She sang pop songs she heard on the radio, transforming them into something entirely her own. The only witness to this nightly ritual was Jasper, an old bay horse who would walk over to the fence whenever he heard her voice, standing perfectly still as if he understood he was experiencing something sacred. Madison's voice wasn't just good, it was otherworldly. It was the kind of voice that could make you forget your own name, that could reach inside your chest and rearrange your heartstrings, that could take every emotion you'd ever felt and somehow make sense of it all in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. But she was convinced it didn't matter. Dreams were for people with connections, with money, with opportunities that girls like her simply didn't get. Dreams were for people who lived in places where dreams came true, not for ranch kids from Bakersfield who smelled like hay and whose biggest aspiration was supposed to be taking over the family business. Everything changed on a Tuesday in March when Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, Jefferson High's music teacher, overheard something that made her freeze in her tracks. She had stayed late to organize sheet music when she heard a voice drifting through the open windows from somewhere across the school grounds. It was hauntingly beautiful, singing an old Patsy Cline song with such raw emotion that Mrs. Hendricks felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She followed the sound to find Madison sitting alone on the bleachers, singing softly to herself, thinking no one could hear. Mrs. Hendricks stood there for 10 minutes, listening with growing amazement as this quiet girl she barely knew delivered what could only be described as a masterclass in vocal perfection. The next day, Mrs. Hendricks approached Madison with an opportunity that would terrify and excite her in equal measure. The California State Talent Competition was coming up, and she wanted Madison to audition. Not just participate, She wanted her to win the whole thing. Madison's first reaction was panic, standing on a stage in front of judges and audiences, having people actually look at her, listen to her, judge her. The girl who couldn't even raise her hand in class was supposed to perform in front of hundreds of people. She said no, of course she said no. But Mrs. Hendricks didn't give up. She spent weeks gently encouraging, explaining what Madison's voice could mean not just for her own future, but for everyone who would hear it. She talked about responsibility, the responsibility that comes with having a gift that rare, that powerful, that capable of moving people and changing lives. Meanwhile, at home, the ranch was facing its worst crisis yet. A severe drought had devastated their crops, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. Madison watched her parents age years in a matter of months, saw her father's shoulders slump a little more each day, heard her mother crying quietly in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. The prize money from the competition could save the ranch. It could save her family's livelihood, their legacy, everything they had worked for across 3 generations. So Madison made a decision that terrified her down to her core. She would audition. The preparation was grueling. Mrs. Hendricks worked with her after school, helping her choose the perfect song, coaching her on stage presence, teaching her to project confidence even when she felt like running away. Madison practiced in the hayloft until her voice was strong enough to fill a stadium, until every note was perfect, until the song became as much a part of her as breathing. She chose "I Hope You Dance" by Lee Ann Womack, a song about seizing opportunities and never settling for less than your dreams deserve. It felt like a message she needed to give herself as much as anyone else. The day of the competition arrived gray and drizzly, matching Madison's nervous energy perfectly. The venue was the beautiful Paramount Theater in downtown Los Angeles, with its ornate ceiling and red velvet seats that had witnessed countless dreams being born or broken over the decades. Madison arrived with her parents, wearing a simple blue dress that Mrs. Hendricks had helped her pick out, nothing fancy, but clean and presentable. Her hands were shaking as they walked through the stage door, past other contestants who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines, with professional styling and expensive outfits, and the kind of confidence that comes from growing up believing you belong on stages. Backstage was chaos. Vocal warm-ups echoed from every corner, parents fussed over their children's costumes, and the air buzzed with nervous energy and hairspray. Madison found a quiet corner and tried to calm her racing heart, tried to remember everything Mrs. Hendricks had taught her about breathing and posture and connecting with the audience. When her number was called, Madison Brooks, contestant number 47, she felt like her legs might give out. The walk from the wings to center stage felt like a journey across an ocean. The lights were blindingly bright, making it impossible to see individual faces in the audience, which was probably a blessing. The judges sat at a long table down front. Marcus Chen, a Grammy-winning producer known for his work with country music's biggest stars, Dr. Angela Martinez, a vocal coach who had trained 3 American Idol winners, and James Patterson, a talent scout whose clients had sold millions of records worldwide. When Madison walked out, the reaction was immediate and crushing. She heard the whispers, saw the judges exchange glances, felt the weight of their assumptions about this farm girl who looked like she'd wandered into the wrong building. Marcus Chen didn't even look up from his notes. Dr. Martinez was scrolling through her phone. James Patterson glanced at his watch as if calculating how much time this was going to waste. Madison stood at the microphone, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. The silence stretched out like an eternity. She could hear her own heartbeat, could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning, could sense hundreds of people waiting for her to confirm their low expectations. For just a moment, she almost walked away. Almost proved everyone right about farm girls who didn't know their place. But then she thought about her parents in the audience, about the ranch they might lose, about all the nights she'd sung her heart out in that hayloft with only Jasper as an audience. She thought about Mrs. Hendricks believing in her, about the gift she'd been born with, and the responsibility that came with it. Madison closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The transformation was instantaneous and absolutely electric. The first note that came out of her mouth was so pure, so powerful, so completely unexpected that it was like someone had flipped a switch in that theater. Dr. Martinez's head snapped up from her phone. Marcus Chen's pen stopped moving across his paper. James Patterson leaned forward in his chair. But Madison was just getting started. As she moved into the verse, her voice seemed to fill every corner of that historic theater, every carved detail in the ceiling, every heart in every seat. She wasn't just singing the words, she was living them, breathing life into every syllable, making every person in that audience feel like she was singing directly to them about their own dreams and struggles and hopes. The judges sat transfixed. Marcus Chen, who had heard thousands of auditions and thought he couldn't be surprised anymore, felt chills run down his spine. Dr. Martinez, the technical expert who usually focused on pitch and technique, found herself completely lost in the emotion of the performance. James Patterson, the industry veteran who prided himself on staying objective, felt his eyes welling up with tears he couldn't explain. By the time Madison reached the chorus, the entire theater had fallen into that kind of complete, breathless silence that only happens when something truly magical is taking place. You could have heard a pin drop, except that every person in that audience was too mesmerized to move, too captivated to breathe, too stunned by what they were witnessing to do anything but listen in absolute wonder. Madison sang with her eyes closed, pouring 17 years of dreams and doubts and determination into every note. She sang about taking chances and living fully and never giving up, and somehow made every person listening feel like those words were meant specifically for them. Her voice soared and dipped and climbed again, painting pictures in the air, telling stories that went far beyond the lyrics of the song. When she hit the final note, holding it clear and strong and absolutely perfect, the silence that followed was deafening. For what felt like forever, nobody moved. The judges stared at her in complete shock. The audience seemed frozen in their seats. Then Marcus Chen started to clap. Slowly at first, then faster, then he was on his feet applauding with everything he had. Dr. Martinez joined him, wiping tears from her eyes. James Patterson stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. Within seconds, the entire theater erupted. The audience was on their feet, cheering and crying and clapping with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for seasoned professionals at the end of world tour. People were shouting, "Bravo," and whistling and applauding so hard their hands hurt. Madison stood at that microphone, overwhelmed and amazed, watching grown adults wipe tears from their eyes because of something that had come from inside her heart. She looked out into the audience and saw her parents crying, saw Mrs. Hendricks jumping up and down, saw hundreds of strangers who had just experienced something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Marcus Chen grabbed the microphone from the judge's table, his voice shaking with emotion as he spoke to the stunned theater. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "in 25 years of doing this, I have never, and I mean never, heard anything like what we just witnessed. This young woman doesn't just have talent. She has the kind of gift that comes along maybe once in a generation." Dr. Martinez was nodding emphatically, still dabbing at her eyes. "That wasn't just technically perfect," she added, "though it absolutely was. That was pure artistry. That was someone taking a song and making it completely their own while honoring every note the composer ever intended." James Patterson, known in the industry for his reserved professionalism, looked directly at Madison and said something that would change her life forever. "Young lady, I don't know where you came from or how you developed that incredible voice, but I can promise you this: you just launched a career that's going to inspire millions of people." Madison won the competition unanimously. Not just won it, dominated it in a way that had never happened in the contest's 15-year history. All three judges gave her perfect scores, and the audience voted her as their overwhelming favorite. But more than the trophy or the prize money or the recording contract offers that started pouring in before she even left the theater, Madison had discovered something infinitely more valuable. She had learned that dreams aren't luxuries reserved for other people. They're possibilities that exist for anyone brave enough to step into the light and share their gifts with the world. The prize money saved the ranch. The recording deal launched a career that would eventually include multiple Grammy nominations and platinum albums. But the real victory happened the moment Madison realized that being different wasn't something to hide from. It was something to celebrate, something to share, something that could light up rooms and change lives and make the world a more beautiful place. Today, Madison Brooks is a household name, but she still goes back to that hayloft sometimes, still sings to Jasper when she needs to remember where it all started. She's established a foundation that provides music education to kids from rural communities, making sure that the next farm kid with a voice like an angel gets the support and encouragement they need to share their gift with the world. Her story reminds us that extraordinary things often come in ordinary packages, that talent doesn't care about zip codes or bank accounts, or whether you smell like hay or designer perfume. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voices come from the quietest places, and that dreams don't have expiration dates or prerequisites or admission requirements. Madison Brooks walked onto that stage as an invisible farm girl and walked off as proof that when you have the courage to share your authentic self with the world, magic happens. Not the fairy tale kind of magic, but the real kind, the kind that changes lives, opens doors, and reminds everyone watching that their own dreams are worth fighting for. The judges were stunned that day, but not nearly as stunned as Madison was to discover that the voice she'd been hiding in a hayloft was exactly what the world had been waiting to hear.